couple questions, probably going to be more of the hot topic bills, but two of them specifically that deal with reproductive options for families that are struggling with infertility. And so I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but 1 in 6 couples in the state of South Dakota struggle with infertility. And we've seen an increase the last 2 years in bills targeting different pieces of that. So the first bill I have a question on your guys' stance is Senate Bill 183. It's one that specifically states, it's basically a commercial contract bill, but then in there it talks about essentially surrogacy contracts and how you cannot force a woman to have an abortion, and makes, there's certain punishments with it and would void the whole contract. However, the people that are bringing that bill have not reached out to the 4 surrogacy attorneys in the state or really done their research into the effects of that, or the fact that what they're trying to prevent is not even possible right now. So I just wanted to see what your guys' stance on it is and see where you would foresee yourself going with that.
I've not read the bill. It's a Senate bill. I see it's being brought by Schoenbeck. I can tell you he is a smart cookie, and I doubt he's doing anything that he's not fully aware of the effects. That said, I haven't read the bill. I will also share with you that I support families that have infertility problems, but I do not support commercial surrogacy. I think it's unethical and immoral for a lawyer to set up a business and charge $50,000 to $100,000 to put together a business that traffics in creating children. I think it's unethical and immoral for a woman to get payment to rent out her uterus. And that's totally different than somebody that steps up and does it out of the love in her heart for a couple that might be friends or family. But when you commoditize, make children a commodity, I just have a problem with that. So I'm just being very honest with you. I'm sure you don't agree with me, but I have to be completely transparent and let you know my thoughts on that.
I appreciate your transparency. The problem with this bill, though, it would make the surrogacy contracts void in the state. So surrogacy would cease to exist. So even if I had someone that wants to do that, the surrogacy contract is the manner in which you establish the parentage, the legal rights, you discuss the process, who's paying for medical bills and that type of thing. The lawyers do require that both parties sit down and have the topic of, let's say the surrogate's life isn't damaged. Can the surrogate make the decision to abort the child? And so that is always placed in the contract. So every single surrogacy contract in the state would be void, and every single family that's trying to have a children would be punished by law.
Understood. And if a surrogacy contract has a clause for abortion, I would not support it. I think that, again, is immoral, that if there are multiple babies that are being conceived and the doctor or the parent or the surrogate wants to do a selective reduction, which is a fancy word for abortion, I think that's terrible. So to the extent that there's a woman that wants to be a surrogate that's a relative or a close family friend, I think that's super, but contracts to have children, to me, is alarming and not something I support.
Thank you for your response.
Thank you for the question.
I think on this issue, honestly, this is the first time I heard about this bill this year. And I would be willing to bet that Representative Mills says the same thing. We're seeing that this bill, Senate Bill 183, will be introduced in the Senate Judiciary Committee on Tuesday. And with that, I'm just going to have to, Tuesday evening, I'll sit down and listen to the committee and give it a fair hearing and see what I think before it comes to the floor.
You know, I'm just looking at the bill here, and what it adds is if the contract includes a provision in the contract that under any circumstances requires a woman to have an abortion or is intended to compel a woman to have abortion, the contract is void. So this is about abortions in a contract. I mean, I don't see any other language outside of that.
I actually spoke directly with Representative Hansen because my husband and I are looking at this as an option to have a child, and asked him, we are pro-life, if we could put in the contract that states the surrogates could only have an abortion in the instance where her life was at risk, and we were told that that would likely void this and would put us in that position. Because essentially it has to do with having anything about abortion in that contract.
Yeah, so contracts now, as I understand it, all have clauses that allow a woman to have an abortion. I don't know. I mean, I'm grateful you're pro-life, and I understand what you're trying to do. So this is the first time I've seen this, but it just goes against my values. So, for what that's worth. Thank you again for the question.
I don't know that I have a lot to add. I think the bill will have its hearing in the Senate, and I would encourage you to add your testimony in that hearing. That's really valuable for those of us that are trying to get smart on a bill when it does get over to the House, to be able to go and listen to the testimony in the committee. Anytime I have a chance to do that, I try to, and so I'd encourage you to add your testimony there. And I guess I'll leave it at that.
One other quick question on another bill that's along similar lines. House Bill 1248 is for the mandatory reporting of embryos that are created. This information is actually already being reported to the accrediting agencies and to the CDC. Why does this information, which could potentially lead to HIPAA violations and the release of private health information, need to become public?
So there is no, I've seen that bill, there is no release of public information, it's just data. The reason the bill is being put forward is because the state has a vested interest in the life and death of its children. Right now we have no way of knowing how many of these embryos are being killed. So it's just a number that's being provided to the state. There is no identifying number or name that's being reported or would be reported.
But there still does have to be a way that that information can be gathered and shared, and it will be put on a public website. It's not just being placed to the state. And again, this information is already being reported to the CDC and to the facilities accrediting agencies.
How do you know that it's being reported?
Because we've actually reached out with Sanford to check, and they're the only facility in the state that does this. But prior to the bringing of this bill, nobody that was listed on that bill reached out to the only facility in our state that performs these.
So if you're pro-life, why wouldn't you support the reporting of knowing of acknowledging a number. If Sanford's the only one, and I just trust that you know what you're talking about with that, but whoever kills these embryos, why wouldn't that be important data for the state to have?
My concern is more with some of the extremes that we see against IVF, those statistics being turned. For example, in that bill, it specifically lists single cell. So cancer patients that are going to undergo chemotherapy, and if they have their eggs harvested, they have to report the date those eggs are harvested, the date the embryo is made. There's a lot of very invasive information that's included in this bill. And so in doing so, it leaves a lot of room to manipulate those statistics, and that could turn around and have a lot of negative impacts for families that want to have children. If we want to address the pro-life issue, I would much rather see it done from a point of limiting the number of embryos that can be created at a time, or a manner in which we can address something instead of just opening it up to statistics that different people can utilize. And if you're not well informed on the topic, with it going public, not everyone is, could have some detrimental effects.
So I've seen the amendment that'll be offered when it's introduced in committee. And I can tell you that the bill is being pared down significantly to only require one thing, and that one thing is a number of embryos that are being destroyed without any personal identification. And all the other components of the bill is being done away with. All that will come out of this committee, if indeed it passes, is the requirement for Sanford or any other facility to provide data on an annual basis of the number of embryos being destroyed. I don't know if that helps.
That does. I was not aware that amendment is out there. Is that posted on the legislator website?
I don't believe it is yet, but whenever this bill is being heard, and I don't have the date for that,
It's
you don't
Tuesday.
watch for that. I'm sure it'll be that, at least by that day.
Okay, well, thank you, yes. It's going to be committee on Tuesday as well.
Okay, great.
And the only thing I would add to that is, sign up and testify. You don't have to drive to Pier anymore because of COVID. We'll send you a link. Microsoft Teams is a free download. It's a very robust program. It doesn't take a ton of bandwidth to operate, and I actually like it a lot better than Zoom. That's the platform we use in the legislature. And please, if you're passionate about any of the bills we've talked about today, you need at least 24 hours ahead of time. So I would recommend you send emails to the link right there on top of the page. And say you want to testify, and if you decide based on an amendment or anything that changes the bill that you're not opposed to it anymore, you can decline when they come to you, and then everything's good. But then you're part of the process, and that's one thing about South Dakota. And I'm not trying to waste time because we're already at an hour, but the citizen is incredibly important to the legislative process in South Dakota as compared to a lot of other states around us. Anybody who wishes may testify on any given bill while it's in a committee. If you have a question, a problem, a concern, you can either by telephone or now through Teams or drive to Pier in person, and you can make your voice heard on every piece of legislation that moves through that building. And it's something, as a former committee chair, we really want to make sure that we do right. We pass our own laws and rules to make sure that it's done right, and we want to make sure you're part of the process. So please, those are unintended consequences I had no idea about with Senate Bill 183. I am a co-sponsor of the bill. I don't even remember signing on to it. It just sounded like a great idea. And it fits within my general belief system. But there are some unintended consequences, and this happens, and this is the process that you'll learn so much about so many different things. There are bills I've signed on to that I thought were great ideas that I helped kill. because they just, once you see both sides of an issue, you learn that it's not so cut and dry every time. So, I mean, these are the things where if you have a perspective, you need to bring it, and you need to be part of the process, and I thank you for coming today.
Hello. Absolutely, Jennie Bo.